Introduction to Wildlife Conservation. Wildlife conservation encompasses the practice of protecting wild animal and plant species and their habitats. It aims to safeguard the Earth's biodiversity for current and future generations. This field involves a multidisciplinary approach, integrating ecology, biology, genetics, and social sciences. Understanding the intricate relationships within ecosystems is crucial for effective conservation efforts. It addresses the urgent need to mitigate human impacts on natural environments. The ultimate goal is to maintain ecological balance and ensure the survival of all life forms. This introductory section lays the groundwork for the entire course. Conservation is not merely about saving individual species. It's about preserving the complex web of life that supports all organisms, including humans. It involves managing natural resources sustainably and restoring degraded ecosystems. The discipline also focuses on educating the public and influencing policy to promote responsible environmental stewardship. Global collaboration is often essential due to the transboundary nature of many wildlife populations and environmental issues. This foundational knowledge is critical for anyone pursuing a career in wildlife conservation. History of conservation efforts. Early conservation efforts often stemmed from utilitarian motives, focusing on resource management for human benefit, such as sustainable hunting or forestry. Indigenous communities worldwide have long practiced forms of conservation, deeply rooted in cultural and spiritual beliefs that emphasize harmony with nature. The Industrial Revolution, however, brought unprecedented environmental degradation, leading to the emergence of modern conservation movements. Figures like John Muir and Theodore Roosevelt championed the establishment of national parks and protected areas in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These early initiatives laid the groundwork for systematic approaches to preserving natural landscapes and their inhabitants. The shift from resource exploitation to preservation marked a significant turning point in human-nature relations. This historical context is vital for understanding current conservation paradigms. The mid-20th century saw a growing scientific understanding of ecology and the interconnectedness of species, spurred by works like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. This period broadened conservation's scope to include biodiversity protection and ecosystem health. International cooperation became more prominent with the establishment of organizations like the IUCN and CITES. The late 20th and early 21st centuries have further emphasized sustainable development, climate change mitigation, and community involvement. Modern conservation acknowledges the complex socioeconomic factors influencing environmental outcomes. It continuously adapts to new scientific discoveries and global challenges. Biodiversity, importance and threats. Biodiversity, or biological diversity, refers to the variety of life on Earth at all its levels, from genes to ecosystems. It encompasses the diversity of species, genetic variation within species, and the variety of ecosystems. This rich tapestry of life is fundamental to the planet's health and human well-being. Each species, no matter how small, plays a role in maintaining ecological balance. The loss of biodiversity can destabilize ecosystems, making them more vulnerable to disturbances. Understanding biodiversity is the cornerstone of effective conservation strategies. It provides the natural resources and services that sustain human life. The importance of biodiversity extends to numerous aspects of human society. It provides essential ecosystem services such as pollination, water purification, soil formation, and climate regulation. Biodiversity is also a source of food, medicine, and raw materials for various industries. Furthermore, it holds immense cultural, aesthetic, and recreational value. However, biodiversity is currently facing unprecedented threats, primarily due to human activities. These threats are leading to a rapid decline in species populations and ecosystem integrity globally. Recognizing these threats is the first step towards mitigating them effectively. Ecosystem services and human well-being. Ecosystem services are the many and varied benefits that humans freely gain from the natural environment and from properly functioning ecosystems. These services are categorized into four main types: provisioning, regulating, cultural, and supporting services. Provisioning services include the production of food, fresh water, timber, and fiber. Regulating services involve climate regulation, flood regulation, disease regulation, and water purification. These services are indispensable for human survival and quality of life. Without them, human societies would face immense challenges in sustaining themselves. Understanding these services highlights our profound dependence on healthy ecosystems. Cultural services encompass the non-material benefits people gain from ecosystems, such as spiritual enrichment, recreation, aesthetic experiences, and mental health benefits. Supporting services, which are necessary for the production of all other ecosystem services, include nutrient cycling, primary production, and soil formation. The degradation of ecosystems directly threatens the provision of these vital services, leading to economic losses, health issues, and reduced well-being. Conservation efforts are therefore crucial not only for wildlife, but also for ensuring the continued flow of these essential benefits to humanity. Protecting nature is protecting ourselves. Causes of biodiversity loss. Biodiversity loss is accelerating at an alarming rate, driven primarily by human activities. The main direct drivers include habitat destruction and degradation, overexploitation of resources, pollution, climate change, and the spread of invasive alien species. These factors often interact in complex ways, exacerbating their individual impacts. Indirect drivers, such as population growth, economic policies, and technological advancements, underpin these direct pressures. Understanding these multifaceted causes is essential for developing effective conservation interventions. Addressing the root causes requires a holistic approach that considers both ecological and socio-economic dimensions. The scale of the problem demands urgent and coordinated global action. Habitat loss is arguably the most significant threat, as it directly removes the living spaces for countless species. Overexploitation, particularly through unsustainable hunting, fishing, and logging, depletes populations faster than they can recover. Pollution, in various forms, contaminates ecosystems and harms wildlife directly. Climate change alters habitats, disrupts species' life cycles, and shifts geographical ranges, leading to widespread ecological stress. Invasive species outcompete native organisms, disrupt food webs, and introduce diseases, further destabilizing ecosystems. Recognizing these interconnected threats is crucial for developing comprehensive conservation strategies. Habitat destruction and fragmentation. Habitat destruction refers to the process by which a natural habitat is rendered unable to support the species native to it. This often results in the displacement or extinction of those species. Major drivers include agricultural expansion, urbanization, infrastructure development, and deforestation. When habitats are destroyed, species lose their food sources, shelter, and breeding grounds. This directly leads to population declines and, in severe cases, local or global extinctions. The scale of habitat destruction globally is immense, particularly in biodiversity hotspots. It is considered the primary driver of species loss worldwide. Understanding its mechanisms is crucial for effective conservation. Habitat fragmentation occurs when large continuous habitats are divided into smaller, isolated patches. This process is often a consequence of destruction, as human developments break up natural landscapes. Fragmentation isolates populations, making them more vulnerable to genetic drift, inbreeding, and local extinctions. It also creates edge effects, where conditions along the fragmented edges differ from the interior, impacting species sensitive to such changes. Corridors. or strips of habitat connecting fragmented areas are sometimes used to mitigate these effects. Addressing both destruction and fragmentation is paramount for maintaining viable wildlife populations and ecosystem health. Climate change impacts on wildlife. Climate change represents a profound and pervasive threat to global biodiversity, altering ecosystems and species distributions at an unprecedented rate. Rising global temperatures, altered precipitation patterns, and increased frequency of extreme weather events directly impact wildlife. Species are forced to adapt, migrate, or face extinction as their habitats become unsuitable. This includes changes in breeding cycles, food availability, and predator-prey dynamics. Polar species, coral reefs, and high-altitude ecosystems are particularly vulnerable to these rapid environmental shifts. The long-term consequences are still unfolding, but projections indicate significant ecological disruption. Addressing climate change is thus integral to wildlife conservation. Beyond direct temperature increases, climate change manifests in various ways that harm wildlife. Ocean acidification, caused by increased absorption of atmospheric carbon dioxide, threatens marine life, especially shell-forming organisms and coral reefs. Sea level rise inundates coastal habitats, impacting nesting sites and feeding grounds. Increased wildfires, droughts, and floods destroy habitats and directly kill animals. The synergistic effects of climate change with other threats like habitat loss and pollution amplify the overall negative impact on biodiversity. Mitigation and adaptation strategies are urgently needed to help wildlife cope with these profound changes. Pollution and wildlife health. Pollution in its many forms poses a significant and pervasive threat to wildlife health and ecosystem integrity. Chemical pollutants, such as pesticides, industrial waste, and heavy metals, can accumulate in food chains, leading to biomagnification and severe health issues for top predators. Plastic pollution chokes and starves marine animals, while microplastics contaminate entire ecosystems. Air pollution contributes to acid rain and respiratory problems in terrestrial species. Light and noise pollution disrupt animal behavior, navigation, and communication. These diverse forms of contamination weaken wildlife populations, making them more susceptible to disease and other environmental stresses. Understanding the pathways and effects of pollution is crucial for developing mitigation strategies. Water pollution, from agricultural runoff to untreated sewage, degrades aquatic habitats and directly poisons fish and other aquatic organisms. Oil spills cause immediate and devastating impacts on marine birds and mammals. Endocrine-disrupting chemicals interfere with animal hormones, affecting reproduction and development. Pharmaceutical waste, often flushed into water systems, can impact aquatic life. The cumulative effects of multiple pollutants can be particularly insidious, leading to chronic health issues, reduced reproductive success, and increased mortality rates across various species. Effective pollution control and waste management are therefore vital components of wildlife conservation. Invasive species and their effects. Invasive species are non-native organisms that are introduced to an ecosystem and cause ecological or economic harm. These species can be plants, animals, fungi, or microorganisms. They are often introduced accidentally, such as through shipping or travel, or intentionally, for purposes like pest control or ornamental gardening. Once established, invasive species can outcompete native species for resources, prey on them directly, or introduce novel diseases. This disrupts the delicate balance of ecosystems, leading to declines in native populations and, in some cases, extinctions. Islands and isolated ecosystems are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of invasive species. Managing invasive species is a critical component of conservation. The ecological effects of invasive species are far-reaching and diverse. They can alter habitats, change nutrient cycling, and modify fire regimes. For example, invasive plants can create monocultures, reducing habitat quality for native wildlife. Invasive predators, such as rats or snakes introduced to islands, have decimated native bird populations. The economic costs associated with invasive species, including damage to agriculture, forestry, and fisheries, are substantial. Early detection and rapid response are key to preventing widespread ecological damage. Control methods range from biological control to mechanical removal and chemical treatments, each with its own challenges and considerations. Overexploitation and illegal wildlife trade. Overexploitation refers to the harvesting of renewable resources to the point of diminishing returns. In the context of wildlife, this means hunting, fishing, or collecting species at rates faster than their populations can replenish themselves. This unsustainable practice is a major driver of species decline and extinction. Examples include commercial whaling, overfishing of marine stocks, and the unsustainable logging of timber. Overexploitation is often driven by economic demand, poverty, and weak enforcement of regulations. It can lead to ecological cascades, where the removal of one species impacts many others in the food web. Preventing overexploitation requires robust management, monitoring, and international cooperation. The illegal wildlife trade is a particularly destructive form of overexploitation, driven by demand for exotic pets, traditional medicine, luxury goods, and bushmeat. It is a multi-billion-dollar illicit industry that threatens thousands of species, from elephants and rhinos to pangolins and exotic birds. This trade often involves sophisticated criminal networks operating across international borders. It not only pushes species to the brink of extinction, but also fuels corruption, undermines rule of law, and can pose public health risks. Combating illegal wildlife trade requires strong law enforcement, intelligence gathering, demand reduction campaigns, and community engagement. It is a critical battlefront in global conservation efforts. Conservation biology principles. Conservation biology is a mission-oriented scientific discipline that focuses on the protection and management of biodiversity. It integrates principles from ecology, genetics, evolutionary biology, and other fields to address the crisis of biodiversity loss. Key principles include the recognition of biodiversity's intrinsic value and its importance for human well-being. It emphasizes the precautionary principle, acting to prevent harm even with scientific uncertainty. The field is inherently interdisciplinary, drawing on social sciences, economics, and ethics. Conservation biology provides the scientific foundation for practical conservation actions. It seeks to understand and mitigate the impacts of human activities on natural systems. Core concepts in conservation biology include understanding population dynamics, genetic diversity, and habitat requirements of endangered species. It also involves identifying biodiversity hotspots and areas of high conservation priority. The discipline uses scientific data to inform conservation planning, such as designing protected areas or developing species recovery plans. It acknowledges the dynamic nature of ecosystems and the need for adaptive management strategies. Conservation biology is a crisis discipline, meaning it often requires urgent action based on the best available scientific knowledge, even if incomplete. Its principles guide efforts to reverse biodiversity decline and promote ecological resilience. Species conservation strategies. Species conservation strategies are tailored approaches designed to prevent the extinction of individual species and facilitate their recovery. These strategies often involve a combination of in situ and ex situ methods. In situ conservation focuses on protecting species within their natural habitats, which is generally considered the most effective approach. This includes establishing and managing protected areas, habitat restoration, and anti-poaching efforts. The goal is to maintain viable populations in the wild. Successful in situ conservation requires a deep understanding of the species' ecology, threats, and genetic makeup. It often involves working closely with local communities and governments. Ex situ conservation involves protecting species outside their natural habitats, typically in zoos, botanical gardens, or gene banks. This approach serves as a crucial safeguard against extinction, especially for critically endangered species. Captive breeding programs aim to maintain genetic diversity and produce individuals for reintroduction into the wild. Seed banks and cryopreservation facilities preserve genetic material for future use. While ex situ conservation is vital, it is often a last resort and aims to support in situ efforts. The ultimate goal is always to return species to self-sustaining wild populations. A balanced approach combining both strategies is often most effective for long-term species survival. Protected areas management. Protected areas such as national parks, wildlife reserves, and marine protected areas are cornerstones of biodiversity conservation. Their primary purpose is to safeguard natural ecosystems, species, and genetic diversity from human-induced threats. Effective management involves a range of activities, including habitat restoration, anti-poaching patrols, visitor management, and scientific research. The design of protected areas, considering factors like size, shape, and connectivity, is crucial for their long-term effectiveness. Management plans must be adapted, responding to changing environmental conditions and new scientific information. The success of protected areas often depends on strong legal frameworks and adequate funding. Challenges in protected areas management are numerous and complex. These include human-wildlife conflict, illegal resource extraction, climate change impacts, and insufficient resources. Engaging local communities in the management process is increasingly recognized as vital for long-term success. This can involve benefit sharing, co-management agreements, and educational programs. Technology, such as remote sensing and drone surveillance, is also playing an increasing role in monitoring and enforcement. Ultimately, protected areas aim to serve as refuges for wildlife, laboratories for scientific study, and places for public enjoyment and education. Their effective management is critical for the future of global biodiversity. Ex situ conservation, zoos and banks. Ex situ conservation involves the preservation of components of biological diversity outside their natural habitats. Zoos and botanical gardens play a critical role in this, housing endangered species for captive breeding programs. These facilities provide a safe environment, veterinary care, and specialized diets, allowing populations to grow. The primary goal is to maintain genetic diversity and produce individuals suitable for reintroduction into the wild. Zoos also serve as important centers for public education and scientific research, raising awareness about conservation issues. They contribute significantly to our understanding of species biology and behavior. Ethical considerations and animal welfare are paramount in all ex situ programs. Beyond living collections, ex situ conservation also includes gene banks, seed banks, and cryopreservation facilities. Seed banks, like the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, store seeds of wild plants and crop varieties, safeguarding genetic material against catastrophic loss. Gene banks preserve genetic material from animals, such as sperm, egg, or tissue samples, often through cryopreservation. These banks act as insurance policies for biodiversity, providing a genetic reservoir that can be used for future breeding or reintroduction efforts. While ex situ methods are not a substitute for habitat protection, they are invaluable tools, especially for species on the brink of extinction, offering a lifeline for their survival. In situ conservation, habitat protection. In situ conservation, meaning on-site conservation, is the primary and most effective approach to protecting biodiversity. It focuses on maintaining and recovering viable populations of species in their natural surroundings. This involves safeguarding entire ecosystems and the ecological processes that sustain them. Key activities include establishing and managing protected areas, such as national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and biosphere reserves. These areas provide critical refuges for species and allow natural evolutionary processes to continue. The goal is to minimize human disturbance within these vital habitats. In situ conservation is fundamental to preserving the complex interactions within ecosystems. Beyond formal protected areas, in situ conservation also encompasses efforts to restore degraded habitats outside these zones. This includes reforestation, wetland restoration, and sustainable land management practices in agricultural or urban landscapes. Community involvement is crucial, as local populations often live alongside and depend on these natural resources. Engaging them in conservation efforts through education, sustainable livelihoods, and co-management enhances the long-term success of habitat protection. By preserving habitats, we ensure that species have the space, resources, and ecological conditions necessary to thrive, allowing natural selection and adaptation to continue unimpeded. Wildlife monitoring techniques. Wildlife monitoring is essential for assessing the health and status of animal populations and the effectiveness of conservation interventions. It involves systematically collecting data on species abundance, distribution, behavior, and demographics. Various techniques are employed, ranging from direct observation to advanced technological methods. Direct observation includes visual counts, track surveys, and acoustic monitoring for vocalizing species. These methods provide baseline data and help identify population trends. Accurate and consistent monitoring is crucial for making informed management decisions. It allows conservationists to detect declines early and adapt strategies as needed. Technological advancements have revolutionized wildlife monitoring. Camera traps capture images and videos of elusive species, providing valuable data on presence, activity patterns, and population estimates. GPS tracking devices fitted on animals provide detailed information on movement, habitat use, and migration routes. Drones and satellite imagery enable large-scale habitat mapping and population surveys from above. Environmental DNA, eDNA, analysis can detect the presence of species from water or soil samples, even if the animals themselves are not observed. These innovative tools enhance our ability to gather comprehensive data, improving the precision and reach of wildlife conservation efforts globally. GIS and remote sensing in conservation. Geographic Information Systems, GIS, and remote sensing are indispensable tools in modern wildlife conservation. Remote sensing involves collecting information about the Earth's surface using sensors on satellites or aircraft. This data, often in the form of satellite imagery, provides broad-scale insights into habitat changes, deforestation, and land use patterns. GIS then allows conservationists to integrate, analyze, and visualize this spatial data from various sources. It enables the creation of detailed maps that illustrate species distributions, habitat suitability, and connectivity. These technologies provide a powerful means to monitor vast and often inaccessible areas. They are crucial for understanding environmental dynamics at multiple scales. The applications of GIS and remote sensing in conservation are extensive. They are used for identifying and prioritizing critical habitats, designing protected area networks, and tracking the impacts of climate change. Conservationists can map deforestation rates, monitor illegal logging, and detect changes in water bodies. GIS also facilitates the modeling of species responses to environmental changes and the prediction of future trends. By providing a comprehensive spatial understanding of ecosystems and threats, these technologies empower conservation practitioners to make data-driven decisions. They are vital for strategic planning and adaptive management in a rapidly changing world. Community-based conservation. Community-based conservation, CBC, is an approach that recognizes the vital role of local communities in protecting wildlife and natural resources. It emphasizes involving local people in the planning, implementation, and management of conservation initiatives. This approach is rooted in the understanding that conservation efforts are more sustainable and effective when they align with the needs and aspirations of those living closest to the resources. CBC often involves empowering communities through capacity building, providing economic incentives, and respecting traditional knowledge. It shifts from a top-down exclusionary model to a more inclusive, participatory one. This collaborative approach fosters a sense of ownership and responsibility among local stakeholders. Successful CBC projects often link conservation outcomes with tangible benefits for communities, such as improved livelihoods, access to resources, or ecotourism opportunities. This creates a direct incentive for communities to protect wildlife and habitats. Examples include community-managed conservancies, sustainable harvesting programs, and anti-poaching units composed of local residents. Challenges can include power imbalances, conflicting interests, and ensuring equitable benefit sharing. However, when implemented effectively, CBC can lead to more resilient conservation outcomes and improved human-wildlife coexistence. It represents a paradigm shift towards more socially just and ecologically sound conservation practices. Wildlife law and policy. Wildlife law and policy provide the legal and regulatory frameworks necessary for effective conservation. These laws operate at local, national, and international levels, governing activities that impact wildlife and their habitats. National legislation typically includes acts protecting endangered species, regulating hunting and fishing, and establishing protected areas. These laws define what activities are permissible and outline penalties for violations. Strong legal frameworks are essential for deterring illegal wildlife trade, habitat destruction, and other harmful practices. They provide the authority for enforcement agencies to act. Understanding these legal instruments is crucial for conservation practitioners. Effective policy development involves translating scientific knowledge and conservation goals into actionable regulations. This often requires collaboration between scientists, policymakers, legal experts, and stakeholders. Policies can range from land use planning regulations to species-specific protection plans and environmental impact assessments. The enforcement of wildlife laws is as important as their existence. Weak enforcement undermines conservation efforts. International agreements, such as CITES and the Convention on Biological Diversity, provide a global framework for cooperation. Navigating the complexities of wildlife law and policy is a key skill for those working to protect biodiversity. International conservation agreements. International conservation agreements are multilateral environmental agreements, MEAs, that address transboundary environmental issues and promote global cooperation for biodiversity protection. These treaties establish legal obligations and frameworks for signatory nations to conserve species and habitats. Key agreements include the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, which sets broad goals for biodiversity conservation. Sustainable use and equitable benefit sharing. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, CITES, regulates the international trade of endangered species to prevent overexploitation. These agreements are crucial because many species migrate across borders, and environmental problems often have global causes and effects. They provide a platform for countries to work together on shared conservation challenges. Other important international agreements include the Convention on Migratory Species, CNS, which focuses on conserving migratory animals and their habitats, and the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, which aims to conserve and sustainably use wetlands. The World Heritage Convention protects sites of outstanding universal value, including natural areas. While these agreements face challenges in implementation and enforcement, they represent a collective commitment to global conservation. They foster scientific exchange, capacity building, and coordinated action among nations. Understanding the scope and implications of these international instruments is vital for anyone involved in global wildlife conservation. Conservation ethics and philosophy. Conservation ethics explores the moral principles and values that guide human interactions with the natural world and underpin conservation efforts. It asks fundamental questions about human responsibilities towards other species and ecosystems. Different ethical frameworks, such as anthropocentrism, biocentrism, and ecocentrism, offer varying perspectives. Anthropocentrism places human interests at the center, valuing nature for its utility to humanity. Biocentrism extends moral consideration to all living beings, while ecocentrism values entire ecosystems and ecological processes. These philosophical stances influence how conservation priorities are set and how conflicts between human needs and wildlife protection are resolved. Understanding these ethical foundations is crucial for navigating complex conservation dilemmas. The philosophical underpinnings of conservation also include concepts like intrinsic value, the idea that nature has value in itself, independent of human use. The land ethic, proposed by Aldo Leopold, suggests that humans are part of a larger ecological community and have a moral obligation to preserve its integrity, stability, and beauty. Environmental justice, another key aspect, addresses the equitable distribution of environmental benefits and burdens. Particularly for marginalized communities, these ethical considerations are not merely academic. They profoundly shape conservation policy, public engagement, and the daily practices of conservationists. A strong ethical framework provides a moral compass for the challenging work of protecting biodiversity. Human-wildlife conflict mitigation. Human-wildlife conflict (HWC) occurs when interactions between wild animals and humans result in negative impacts on human social, economic, or cultural life, on the conservation of wildlife populations, or on the environment. These conflicts can manifest as crop raiding by elephants, livestock depredation by predators, or property damage by primates. HWC is a significant challenge for conservation, often leading to retaliatory killings of wildlife and undermining conservation efforts. It is exacerbated by habitat loss, increasing human populations, and climate change. Effective mitigation strategies are crucial for fostering coexistence and ensuring the long-term survival of both humans and wildlife. Understanding the drivers of HWC is the first step towards resolution. Mitigation strategies for HWC are diverse and often site-specific. They include non-lethal deterrents, such as electric fences, guard dogs, and chili bombs to protect crops and livestock. Land use planning can help separate human settlements from critical wildlife areas. Early warning systems and community education programs empower people to respond safely to wildlife encounters. Compensation schemes for losses can reduce economic hardship and build tolerance. Translocation of problem animals is sometimes considered, though it has its own challenges. Ultimately, successful HWC mitigation requires a holistic approach that addresses both human needs and wildlife conservation goals, promoting sustainable coexistence through collaborative solutions. Funding and economics of conservation. Effective wildlife conservation requires substantial financial investment, and understanding the economics of conservation is crucial for sustainable funding. Funding sources are diverse, including government budgets, private donations, philanthropic foundations, and international aid. Innovative financing mechanisms, such as carbon credits, biodiversity offsets, and payment to the ecosystem services (PES) schemes, are also gaining prominence. These mechanisms aim to create economic value for conservation outcomes. The economic benefits of conservation, though often indirect, are significant, including ecotourism revenue, ecosystem service provision, and the discovery of new medicines. Demonstrating these economic values can help justify investment in conservation. Challenges in conservation economics include securing long-term funding, valuing intangible ecosystem services, and ensuring equitable distribution of benefits. Cost-benefit analyses are often used to evaluate conservation projects, but placing monetary values on biodiversity is complex and controversial. Corruption and inefficient resource allocation can also hinder effective spending. Sustainable financing strategies often involve diversifying funding streams and building local capacity for financial management. Ultimately, the long-term success of conservation depends on integrating economic considerations into planning and demonstrating that protecting nature is a sound investment for society. It requires a shift in perspective from viewing conservation as a cost to seeing it as an essential investment. Role of technology in conservation. Technology plays an increasingly vital role in advancing wildlife conservation efforts globally. From monitoring and data collection to anti-poaching and public engagement, technological innovations offer powerful solutions to complex challenges. Remote sensing and GIS enable large-scale habitat mapping and change detection, providing crucial insights for protected area management. Camera traps and acoustic sensors automate wildlife monitoring, capturing data on elusive species without human disturbance. Drones provide aerial surveillance for anti-poaching operations and habitat assessments. These tools enhance the efficiency, accuracy, and reach of conservation activities. They allow conservationists to work smarter and more effectively. Beyond monitoring, technology also aids in combating illegal wildlife trade through DNA forensics and blockchain-based tracking systems. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are used to analyze vast datasets, predict wildlife movements, and identify poaching hotspots. Mobile apps facilitate citizen science initiatives, allowing the public to contribute valuable data. Social media platforms are leveraged for awareness campaigns and fundraising. While technology offers immense potential, it also presents challenges, such as data privacy, accessibility, and the need for skilled personnel. Integrating appropriate technologies thoughtfully is key to maximizing their positive impact on wildlife conservation. It represents a new frontier in the fight to protect biodiversity. Future challenges in wildlife conservation. Despite significant progress, wildlife conservation faces numerous daunting challenges in the coming decades. Climate change will continue to intensify, leading to more extreme weather events, habitat shifts, and ocean acidification, pushing many species to their limits. Rapid human population growth and increasing consumption patterns will exert greater pressure on natural resources and habitats. The persistent threats of habitat destruction, pollution, and overexploitation will remain critical. Emerging infectious diseases, potentially exacerbated by climate change and human-wildlife interactions, pose new risks to both wildlife and human health. These interconnected global challenges require innovative and adaptive solutions. Addressing these future challenges will demand greater international cooperation, stronger political will, and increased financial investment. Bridging the gap between scientific knowledge and effective policy implementation will be crucial. Engaging diverse stakeholders, including indigenous communities, businesses, and youth, will be essential for creating inclusive and sustainable conservation solutions. The challenge of balancing human development with biodiversity protection will become even more pronounced. Fostering a global culture of environmental stewardship and promoting sustainable lifestyles are long-term goals. The future of wildlife conservation depends on our collective ability to adapt, innovate, and act decisively in the face of escalating environmental crises. Career paths in wildlife conservation. A career in wildlife conservation offers diverse and rewarding opportunities for individuals passionate about protecting nature. Common roles include field biologists, who conduct research and monitoring of species in their natural habitats. Wildlife managers work to implement conservation plans, often within protected areas or government agencies. Ecologists study the interactions between organisms and their environment, providing crucial scientific insights. Environmental educators raise public awareness and inspire action through various programs. These roles often require a strong scientific background, practical field skills, and a deep commitment to conservation principles. The work can be challenging, but profoundly impactful. Beyond direct scientific and field roles, there are many other avenues in conservation. Policy analysts and legal experts work to shape and enforce environmental laws and international agreements. Communication specialists and fundraisers are vital for advocating for conservation and securing financial support. GIS specialists and data scientists use advanced technology to analyze spatial data and inform decision-making. Community development officers work with local populations to integrate conservation with sustainable livelihoods. A career in wildlife conservation can be found in government agencies, non-profit organizations, research institutions, and private consulting firms. It is a dynamic field constantly evolving to address new challenges.